welcome to my channel. This is an indication of some of the things that I cover on a regular basis in my videos. If you haven't already subscribed, please feel free to do so, and don't forget to click the little bell so that you'll get notified of future videos. Please feel free to share my videos on your social media, and I hope you enjoy the video which follows. Well, hello everybody. As the title indicates, I'm going to make a cheddar cheese, or attempt to make a cheddar cheese, using my sous vide. I say sous vide, which I realize is now I've been corrected. That's wrong. It should be sous vide. Will I ever remember to pronounce it correctly or not? I don't know, but I love the little thing. Second time I've used it for making cheese. It's going right now, warming the 16 liters of milk up to 88 degrees Fahrenheit, 31 degrees Celsius. It's been going for a little over an hour because the milk was very cold, but it's almost there. Something else I wanted to talk about here. In this last video that I made, making the Caerphilly cheese, I said something about it's cheese, it's not rocket science. I think probably I was referring to the temperature on the sous vide being 1 degree higher than it was supposed to be. But I wanted to tell you what I mean more by it's not rocket science. This is a piece of cheddar, sort of a failed cheddar, that I made about 7 months ago, and this is all that remains of it. In the cheddaring process, which you do prior to putting it in the mold, and you'll understand that better when we get to that phase here, I was doing it in a hot water bath on the stove, and you flip over the curd, and then it sets for, I think it's 10 minutes before you do that again. Well, it got up to temperature, and I flipped the cheese and went away and waited the 10 minutes. What I forgot to do was shut the stove off. When I came back, it was far hotter than it should ever have been. And I was tempted to just throw the whole thing out. I thought, no, I've gone this far. What difference does it make? All you've got to do now is press it in a mold and wax it or whatever. I didn't. I think with this one I vacuum sealed it and let it age. Like I say, that's 7 months ago. Just before Christmas, I cut into it. Now, it's crumbly, but then some aged cheddar is crumbly. I'll show you what I mean. When I cut down through it here, it'll make me a liar. Now, it's already sort of broken there in one place, I guess. It falls apart, and I think that's because the curd was so solid after being in that extra heat that they didn't really knit together very well. However, it has an excellent, sharp, aged cheddar flavor. So, that's what I mean by it's not rocket science, it's just cheese. I'm glad I didn't throw it out. I've really been enjoying it, and as I said, that's what's left. I've given some bit away also, but an excellent cheese, or maybe a bit more crumbly than it should be. I don't know what exactly cheese it would compared to rather than a cheddar, but it has an excellent sharp cheddar flavor. So let's move on and start making this next batch of cheddar. Well, the recipe once again is basically coming from this book. I am taking some of the instructions from the cheesemaking.com website, their recipe, mainly for the pressing of it. This book just does basically 2 pressings, a brief one for a half hour, and then presses it for another 10 or 12 hours at the same amount of pressure. But I think I like the version that the cheesemaking.com does for that, but I do like this book. It makes the processes a lot simpler. So let's move on. The first phase is to increase the temperature of the milk up to 88 degrees Fahrenheit, 31 degrees Celsius, and I think we're at that temperature now. Well, it has just reached the 88 degrees Fahrenheit, 31 degrees Celsius. It took 2 hours and 16 minutes, but the milk was very cold, and the 2 hours and 16 minutes doesn't bother me at all because I no longer have to worry about it overheating. With my little contraption there that I think you can see part of. It can't get any hotter. It raises it to the temperature that you ask it to go to, and then it holds it. So that is wonderful. That was a ½ teaspoon of mesophilic culture, and now it sits on the surface of the milk for 5 minutes while it hydrates. It's had its rest to rehydrate, and now you mix the culture down into the milk with an up and down motion with the cheese skimmer, spatula type thing. Just sort of draws it down from the surface, mixes into the rest of the milk. I think that will probably do. Now it gets covered and it rests for 40 minutes while the culture sort of multiplies and matures a bit, maintaining the 88 degrees, 31 degrees Celsius temperature for the 40 minutes. I'll bring you back at the end of that time. Well, it's had its 40 minutes to ripen, and now I have 3 additions to make. Each one is in 1/4 cup of, for me, just tap water. What that was on the surface of the milk, but it's gone. The first one that I'm adding is annatto. Annatto is a natural product from the annatto tree. Seems to have some sediment at the bottom. I won't use all that. That's 1/8 teaspoon of annatto mixed in 1/4 cup of water. I made Colby once, and whatever it required for annatto in that one was too much. It was a dark yellow color, and I could taste it. But I think 1/8 teaspoon diluted in 16 liters of milk, I won't be noticing it. And as I said, it's a natural product. It's what's traditionally used to color cheese. Some of the factory-made stuff today, it's hard to say what chemical they might be using. It comes from the annatto tree, wherever that happens to grow, I don't know. And that was 3/4 teaspoon of calcium chloride. And you add that if it's pasteurized milk. If it's raw milk, you don't have to add that. I think the purpose is that it acidifies the milk, or helps to acidify the milk. And the last addition here is 3/4 teaspoon of rennet. Once I have that thoroughly incorporated, I'll stop the motion by putting this skimmer thing on the side, on its side. And this rests for 40 minutes at the target temperature of 88 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'll see you in 40 minutes time. Well, it's had its 40 minutes. Now I'll check to see if I've got a clean break or not. If not, it can set for another 10 minutes or so. Seems to be quite well set though. Yep, and that's a nice clean break, so we're ready to cut into 1/2-inch cubes if possible. Mine never seem to be cubes because of the way I do it, but and as I always say at this point, I won't make you watch the whole process. I do a hatch mark thing first, all the way across the way that I'm going, and then I turn and come all the way back across this way. And then I use a whisk to break the curds up down below, but I'll bring you back when it's time to use the whisk. Well, I finished that part, and now I use a whisk, as I say, to break it up down below. You can do it with the curd cutter spatula that I was using, but I like this method better. I just keep going in concentric circles, and after I've done that layer I just go down a little lower. This is quite a solid curd. You can really feel some resistance there. I was fascinated by the small amount of difference in making a cheese using the same culture, just changing the amount of the culture and the temperature that it's cooked at and all of that sort of thing. You end up with totally different cheese. Of course, the one that I made previously, the Carfilly that's still aging, that had 2 cultures in it. This only has 1. But the temperatures are different. And this is going to be next. It's going to be raised to an even higher temperature. I'll bring you back once I've hit bottom here. I finished cutting the curd, and now it is allowed to rest and settle for 5 minutes and maintaining the same temperature. It's had its 5 minutes rest. I just reset the sous vide to 102 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 39 degrees Celsius. And over the next 45 minutes, it should take at least 45 minutes to increase the temperature of the curd and whey to 102. My experience from using this once before, it's going to take me longer than 45 minutes, over 2 hours I would imagine. And it has to be stirred, well, practically continuously. You can't let it rest very long. The curd will become the size of peas or beans, it says. Stirring it for a longer period of time while it increases the temperature to 102 Fahrenheit isn't a problem. You just don't want to do it quicker than that. The slower cooking of the curd is okay, but cooking it quickly is not good. So I'll bring you back once I get this up to 102 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, it's had 45 minutes, and I've been checking the temperature every 10 or 15 minutes or so. As you can see, the curds are quite small, quite a bit smaller. I know it's not up to temperature yet, but I'll check and see what it is at 45 minutes. .8. So I guess we might as well say 100 degrees. It's got to go up another 2 degrees. It has to go up to 102. So I will continue stirring. I don't think that'll take much more than, oh, I don't know, 10-15 minutes or so. Well, that took 1 hour and 25 minutes for me to get it up to temperature, but it is there now. And now it rests and stays at the temperature of 102 for 40 minutes. And the curd should settle. I don't think those things that are floating on top are going to settle, but I'll catch those when I drain off the whey. But the curd, most of the curd should settle on bottom and sort of begin to mat up in that time. So I'll bring you back in 40 minutes time. Well, that is a cheesecloth lined colander in the sink. And I'm going to try to pour the whey and the curds off into it. All of it, I guess. With the other half of this sink with water and the stopper in it, it doesn't drain very well. It will eventually drain. If I take the stopper out the other side, I'm going to lose my warm water that this is going back into. So this goes back in the same pot that it came out of and into the water bath again at 102. I guess that's both those to get out of there. This is the beginning of the cheddaring process. So that is it. There's still whey coming out of it, as you can see. 10 minutes, and then I will remove the whey that's come out of it and turn it again. And you do that every 10 minutes for the rest of the cheddaring process. It has to, it sort of forms into a block, if you can imagine that. It has to be cheddared on all four sides. So it won't be a perfect block, but that's my way of describing it anyway. So, well, that's the fourth turn. I may do one more. It was quite a while coming together, but it seems to have sort of, as they say, knit together. So I will probably do one more turn after this one. Well, that's the cheddaring part finished. And as you can see, I've got it on a tea towel, just because I now have to cut it. And I thought it would be easier to collect up any of the smaller pieces and get them into the colander if I had it on a towel. Hopefully I won't cut my tea towel all to pieces, but it's not going to be a lot of action with the knife. It goes down through it quite easily. Now the idea here is about 2 inches long or so and a ½ inch wide. They call them French fries, so it does sort of look like white French fries, doesn't it? Some of these are a bit longer than others, but some are a bit shorter. As I've said before, it's cheese, it's not rocket science. I'm going to put it in the colander. It gets salted next before it goes into the mold. So try to work as quickly as possible here so that it won't cool down completely. Cheddaring process was the time that the point where I lost it with the last one there. Got way too hot, but it still ended up being a good tasting cheese. I guess you probably wouldn't call it cheddar. I don't know what it is, but it has a lovely flavor to it. So hoping for a better result this time, several months from now. I'll bring you back when I have finished this cutting. There it is, all cut up, and now it gets salted with 2½ tablespoons of well, either kosher salt, pickling salt, any salt that doesn't have iodine in it. What I'm using is a sea salt, and it's also certified kosher, which just means it doesn't have any additional additions like iodine or anything like that. It's just the natural salt. It also gets brined, I think. Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure it does when it comes out of the mold tomorrow sometime. But this is an initial salting anyway. Curds are quite strong, rubbery. Well, next thing to do is to pack this into the mold and begin pressing it. So I'll bring you back in a few seconds here. All of my cheeses end up looking like Gouda cheeses because I like this mold so well. But once again, I'm going to use my Gouda mold with the lining already in it. That way I do not have to use cheesecloth, and it makes it much easier when you're turning the cheese over and putting it back in the mold. At least it has up to this point. I hope it still does. Well, that certainly fills it initially anyway. And you can see if we can start getting it compressed. I'll get out my cheese press. The first pressing, as I said I think at the beginning of this video, I'm using the pressings from cheesemaking.com. To me it makes more sense than what this book is saying. First pressing is for an hour at about 20 pounds. So, I'm sure it'll have to be adjusted several times during that hour as the follower gets shoved down further and more of the whey is extracted. We are started anyway. I'll bring you back in an hour's time when I take it out and turn it over for the first time. It's had an hour at 20 pounds, and as you can see it has gone down a lot. So hopefully that means it has consolidated it enough that I can turn it over without it falling apart. Still got some pretty big holes and things in it. At least it seems to be one piece. Now, we put this back together in another hour at 20 pounds, just the same as it was the last time, only it has been flipped. There it is once again at 20 pounds pressure, so I'll bring you back in an hour when we flip it once again. It said its second hour at 20 pounds, and now it gets flipped once again, and this time it goes for 4 hours at 40, yes, 4 hours at 40 pounds. Hopefully that will consolidate it a little better. It's solidly together, but it's still got a lot of seams and cracks in it. I suspect I'll have to keep watching it because it'll probably lose pressure. At this higher pressure it will make it expel a lot more whey, and I'll have to be readjusted, I'm sure, before the 4 hours are up. But I'll bring you back in 4 hours' time. It just finished 4 hours at 40 pounds. And here comes the long one. It now gets flipped once again. And the next pressing is 24 hours. Anywhere from 50 to 75 pounds. So we'll see what we do with it. 50 to 75 pounds of pressure for 24 hours. is coming together much nicer than it was. You can still see some of the lines and cracks in it, but it's a lot more solid than it used to be. See how much pressure I can get it up to. I'll go as high as I can get it, I guess. Well, that's almost 60 pounds. And that is almost 70 pounds. So that seems to be as far as I can get it. I think one thing, I think the springs are completely compressed, so we'll have to be satisfied with 70 pounds, I guess. Although, yeah, it's set up to 75, but you're not going to be able to get it up to 75 because the springs won't compress any further. So 24 hours from now we'll see what it looks like. Well, the finished product is quite smooth. Got rid of most of the wrinkles and cracks that were in it. I'm curious as to what it weighs. The recipe said finished product could be 3 1/4 to 3 1/2 pounds. Wow, okay. I wasn't expecting it to be that much. Mine's just a little over 4 pounds. I thought it would probably weigh less because I pressed it a lot more than the recipe that I was using required. So this is almost 4 pounds 2 ounces. 4 pounds 1.7 ounces, so almost 4 pounds 2 ounces. That's impressive. Now I will put it on this rack on a cheese mat as well, so air can circulate around it. I'll cover it with a tea towel and leave it for a few days until it's good and dry, and then I'll put the cheese coating on it. I'll bring you back at that time. Less than 24 hours and it's dry enough to put the cheese coating on it. As I say before, I guess, and my house is very dry in the winter, and particularly today, this is our coldest day so far this year. It's -14 and a gale of wind outside. But I won't make you watch, as I always say, all of this. I will be doing 2 coats. That takes quite a while. Although I put a fan on it, and the fan makes it dry much faster, so that does go quite well. Hopefully you noticed the color before I started painting it. I'm quite pleased with the color. The small amount of annatto that I used has given it a nice creamy yellow color. So I'll bring you back and show you the final cheese once it has been coated. Since my cheeses are all shaped the same, I've got to put labels on. I only have one other one, that Carfilli that's in the cheese fridge right now. But I'm going to label it. I'll show you how I do that as the last step here. Well, I finished the waxing. This is the cheddar and this is my Carfilli. The labels that I'm using, that's in focus or not, but I print them on my computer. They're an Avery label, A-V-E-R-Y, either avery.com or avery.ca if you're in Canada. Many different kinds of labels. These are just like a little address label. Take one off. I printed the whole sheet even though I didn't put the writing on the whole sheet. It would have been just white. All of this is printed by the computer. I made enough that I can certainly label them now. And I have several more printed for when I finally cut into the cheese, because what I usually do at that time is I divide the cheese up into at least 4 pieces, and I vacuum pack it, so it would then have another label put on each piece then. And what I'm going to do, these are just going to peel off if I don't do something, so I'm just going to paint some of the coating over them, and when that dries you'll still be able to read through it. It's less apt to fall off. At one point in the video I said that it would be brined also after it was, after I'd finished the word I'm looking for, after I finished pressing it. That is wrong, and I did put a comment on the screen there that's wrong. The 2.5 tablespoons of salt that I added to the curd are all of the salt that goes in this. So I thought I'd better mention that now, because if you're watching this on a small screen like a phone or whatever, you won't be able to read what I wrote on the screen anyway. Well, that is it. It is finished. It will now be put in the same cave as the Carfilly to fridge to age, but I will age the cheddar at least 6 months, so it'll be July or August sometime before I cut into the cheddar. Thank you very much for watching.